Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Mansfield School Building Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 9, 2021 meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Yes.
Can I say there needs to be a correction? I was not at that meeting and I'm listed as though I am there.
Okay. So noted. We have a motion from Chris to accept the minutes. Is there a second? Kathy, thank you. Any other corrections? Then all in favor of approving the minutes, give me a sign. Kathy is excited about approving the minutes. Any objections or abstentions? We have one abstention. Okay, thank you. That brings us then to our OPM update. So Adam, I will turn it over to you.
Very good. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, you should all see the high level construction.
Yes.
2 months look ahead. So by and large, the large bulk of the construction is still going to be through the site for the time being. The notable change moving forward will be in October. We'll start to see steel elements getting put in. We're expecting steel pieces to start showing up on site shortly, and then being erected in October, and then progressing through the building from there. So that'll start to be exciting to see some things starting to go vertical. Although there will be a bulk of work always to do with the site for the next couple of months. Just as a corollary to that, to kind of give the committee some additional heads up. One thing that came up today was some additional unsuitable fill soil on the site. If you remember the last meeting, we the committee approved to move forward with on a unit cost basis to remove some organic materials that had been found near some of the sidewalk. Additional areas have been found throughout the site, and notably some areas by some of the foundations that have been already poured. So we had the geotechnical engineer go out on site today to make a site visit, to make some observations, and to determine what needs to be done moving forward. So we have we don't want to, our goal is not to eliminate the entire world of every possible bit of soil that isn't perfect, but obviously we need to make sure that our foundations and any building elements and hardscape elements are well-founded. So we'll be providing an update on that once we know more. We just need to get the scope of what remediation needs to be done and if there are any schedule impacts or anything of that nature. The other just quick note on just some side administrative items. We've been coordinating with town finance, and we should be submitting our first reimbursement for the state for some of the reimbursement funds from monies expended so far on the project. So I'm getting the ball rolling on that, and that's good. We have.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
That's the SCG 042.
Yes.
And do we need the Board of Education to sign off on that before we can submit to the state?
I don't believe so, but that's Scott has been wrangling that with Charmaine. And I know there was some technical glitches with the town and so, or not the town, with the state insofar as their website and getting in there and being able to wrangle the forms. So like I said, I don't believe so, but don't hold me to that. That's a good Scott question. I can coordinate with them on that, and if need be, then we'll put that in front of the board quickly. Other items, just from an OPM standpoint, earlier today we had a good conversation about the energy dashboard with ABS and Allerton. I'll kind of show an example dashboard for the whole committee here. So this is one that ABS had pointed to as sort of a example that they had put together in the past from Eastern Connecticut State. So something along these lines could be generated for the Mansfield project, where we have usage data and graphs, history over time, There's even the potential for, some cool graphics insofar as, get this bigger, this is obviously a whole campus, but maybe something for the building. So there's a lot of ideas and a lot of opportunities there. So the next steps will be to start generating what we think will be useful and what the town and the school district would think will be useful insofar as data to be presented and in what way, in what shape, and what form, and then presenting that to ABS to get a quote for it. The Allerton backup system is included in their scope of services. It's just the website that would have to be built, much like you would have to build any other website that would cost money. But they obviously couldn't provide a quote for just a nebulous scope of work for a website, but it seemed to be substantially less than some of the quotation we received from it was CMTA, I believe.
MTA, yeah.
So that's and wouldn't be an ongoing hosting cost or anything like that. So it appears to be a fairly viable option. So that's something that we'll be brainstorming about what we want to do and what the town wants to find, what the town wants to put forward in their website.
Right. And so just for the committee, that website for Eastern Connecticut State University is live. If you Google Energy Dashboard, ECSU, you will find it. You can see what they've done there. And that's really just looking at overall energy usage throughout their buildings. We'd want to include something with the energy we're producing as well as the energy usage. But the Allerton system does collect an enormous amount of information that the town facilities people will use to monitor the building, but we can leverage that to create a website that, as Adam says, probably a lot cheaper than what the quote was from CMTA.
And then the last thing I had for my part here, there's a couple of items I'll talk about near the end of the meeting, but was just some approved items that need to be done on an expedited basis through the subcommittee of Randy, Kelly, Ryan, and Kathy. There were 3 items that came up, 2 PCOs and a survey ad service. And those were all in the packet that I had posted via the link. PCO 12 was for an increase in some pumps. The reason why, and all just for your back pocket, the reason why all these went through the expedited committee was they were under 10,000 and they needed to be done on an expedited basis in order to keep procurement moving. For the 2 PCOs, they needed to release those items so they could not slow down construction. And then similarly with the services for the surveying, which I'll mention in a second, it needed to happen so we wouldn't slow down the construction process. So just to summarize, PCO 12 was for some upgraded pumps for the mechanical system. PCO 16 was for code required relocation of the septic tank. We had the health department come out and indicate that the tank couldn't be located where we thought it could be, so it had to be shifted. So there was an increased length of piping that needed to be provided. And then
that was the septic for the concession stand, not for the school.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. The existing septic for the building is installed on the other portion of the site. And the last item that was approved was for some survey staking along the property line in conjunction with the tree RFP that we'll be looking at later on today. Some of the trees that were marked for removal were very close to the adjacent residential properties. So having some staking along the property lines would be good to ensure that contractors aren't taking down trees that the town doesn't own, and there aren't trespassing on the neighbors' properties, and having some delineation as opposed to just a yard and a fence. So those were those 3 items that had been approved by the subcommittee.
Chris?
Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I asked the same sort of question last time when we did another one of these change orders that feels a lot like a mistake to me, an oversight. If somebody left out a beam or a post, are we supposed to eat that too? I mean, where does it end that we don't have to cover for somebody else's, frankly, mistakes? And not facetiously, do these things ever happen where we save money? I think I remember one, but It's just always costing us more. At least maybe this is one of those psychological things. You always remember the bad stuff. But again, where does the responsibility actually, where's the border? How do we ever feel like we're getting the services we thought we paid for initially?
So I can touch that a bit, and then if Richard wants to expound, he can. But a lot of this is a process that occurs through design and construction in terms of design development. I believe Richard had referred to in the past about the shop drawings coming in, and there are certain details that there's no way to iron out every single detail through a reasonable design process under a reasonable standard of care. You could spend 10 years designing a building, and some small thing in the corner, there's no way to iron that out. Or, as often the case, things might change during the design process. We have a year and a half coming up from project development, and then
I get, Adam, excuse me, but in this case, it sounded like a couple of pieces of equipment did not match. So we knew about this piece of equipment. We knew about that piece of equipment. They don't match. They're not compatible is probably not the right word, but they're not as efficient, or whatever the write-up said, as it ought to be. So again, it feels like something that could have been figured out ahead of time with a little more care.
And understood.
And we're on the hook for it.
And understood. And that is an item that errors and omissions is something that's tracked. And Colliers manages that as part of the change order process. Every change order that comes through, we designate. And if it gets to the point where there's flagrant problems outside a normal standard of care, then we identify that and flag that as the owner's rep. So far, we have not seen that outside a normal standard of care. And if we did, we'd certainly mention it. But part of this is why there are contingencies built in. Why, if you want the building in 2 months, it's very different than if you want it in 10 years. So insofar as the bits and pieces of this pump not matching, I didn't look at the shop drawings. Again, I don't know if Richard and Jeff have a better sense of that, but so far we've not noticed anything outside of the ordinary to flag to the town of Mansfield, hey, the architect, the contractor, whomever is not doing a reasonable job of building the building for you.
Sure, Adam, I can add to what you said. You did a very good job explaining it. But just to add to that, this building has never been built before. This is a one-off. This is one of a kind. It's not like Ford building a bunch of vehicles and then fine-tuning it and getting it the assembly correct. It's a one of a kind. So there are human frailties. There are occasionally oversights and omissions. And the process is to identify them as quickly as we can before they are actually installed. So this was caught before it was installed. Is it a betterment to the job? Yes, there's a betterment to the job. And the rules of this industry are, if there's a betterment, it has to be paid for. So that's basically the principles under which we operate, Chris. I know it's a little frustrating. Why can't it be perfect? It's just not that same kind of industry as another industry that makes cookies day in and day out. It's one of a kind.
And to expound on that too, especially on the betterment portion of it, if they, let's say that it was a mistake, it was an error, somebody just they wrote a 6 when they meant a 9. If that had been caught in the beginning, the price of the construction would have still gone up by the price of the pumps. So there's still an increase, like Richard was referring to, in betterment. It's just you happen to find out about it now, and we have the funds available to cover it, so no one's underwater because of a design development issue. So, but to your point, that is something we monitor and track as the owner's representative to ensure it's not becoming flagrant and it's not due to lack of due diligence or similar.
Okay, other questions? Okay. Adam, do you have other items, or is that?
No, as part of this, that's where I'm at. If we want to move to Richard and Jeff.
Okay, we'll come back to some other invoices and stuff later from you.
Yep.
So, okay, then with that, we'll move on to Richard. I believe Richard, are you, okay?
Yes.
The architect update.
Thanks very much. There were 4 items I wanted to update the committee on, the first of which is the educational display brainstorming session that we had. You may recall that we've talked about creating some features that could be educational on walls. So we had a meeting last week on September 14th, and in attendance were members of this committee. Mary DeBeckis was there, Madison Day, Chris Kiefner, through the miracle of Zoom, attended from the West Coast. And then we also had Adam Levitas, I was there along with Jeff Brown, and then we had Yugon, Tomomi, and Anna from IKD, who were located in Boston, and Tomomi was in LA. So again, through the miracle of technology, we're able to all get together and brainstorm a discussion about what these educational displays might be. And the things that came to mind are graphics, displays, maybe 1 or 2 locations in the building. And Yugon reminded us that when he did his graphic design for the purpose of distinguishing different classroom clusters with different color palettes, they worked with Susan Pinckney from my office to develop that palette. They created some graphic walls that were abstractions of trees. It was very colorful. They had on their plan identified 2 potential walls. One was near the balcony that faces south, and another one was near the pre-K entrance that goes out into the playground area. There is a potential 3rd location, I said, that could be where the mechanical room is on the ground floor. Chris Kiefner has mentioned a few times that having a window looking at mechanical equipment might be educational, as well as perhaps even window cutouts in walls or ceilings or floors. But after a lot of discussion, I think the discussion also included, should one of the walls maybe feature net zero energy, perhaps the history of Mansfield, perhaps a story about the former 3 schools that were consolidated into 1 new school. But in the end, I asked the participants to just say a few words, if they could capture in a couple of phrases or a couple of words what the main messages should be. And what we got out of it was that a citizen of the world, which is something that is part of the curriculum and is identified in something that Kelly said is a document called Portrait of the Graduate, that outlines a view of what the graduates of the Mansfield educational curriculum should be. And citizen of the world seemed to resonate with people. That whatever these displays are, they should be engaging, interactive, and playful. They should attract attention of visitors immediately at the front of the building, and maybe should occur throughout the building and on the interior. Chris said they should be vertical, and I took that to mean they allow for engagement by young and old, from little people and bigger people, and be ever-changing, because in the future, maybe net zero is so ho-hum that that isn't what's necessary in the display. That it should be something that should evolve over time. So what happens next? What happens next, I believe, should be some conceptual work to try to create some method of display so that we can get it budgeted and detailed. So I'm going to be asking this committee if it's possible for us to engage IKD to do that kind of conceptual work. This would be additional work. It would be a change order to Newfield if we ask Newfield to do it, or we would have to put out an RFP for installation by somebody, or it could be a design build proposal by someone who does this sort of work. So that's where we stand. I think the next step is some more concrete conceptual design work needs to be done.
So Richard, when I looked over your notes from that meeting, it seems like one of the, I don't know, flavors that kind of came through is that this should be something that is perhaps more interesting to elementary kids, at least part of it, than to adults who are not going to be in the building all that much. So I'm, you know, is that accurate? Does that seem appropriate? Is that right?
Yeah, there was some discussion about that. I mean, especially because it's evolving. The population in the school will change over time. And the focus of the curriculum may change over time. So something that maybe is more interesting to children rather than adults, something that maybe is the work product of children that somehow is incorporated into the displays, may be more appropriate. But I leave that to this committee to discuss even further. I mean, we finished the brainstorming session, but I'm looking for input on what the next step might be from your perspective.
Randy, if I can just add to that, yes, definitely for kids, but also my vision of it is that it's also of interest, worthwhile, and in some different ways, educational and convincing for adults as well. I think there will be plenty of parents in there, but in addition to that, we'll have a lot of visitors who will be curious and looking, and I think it's an opportunity to spread the good word.
Questions or comments from the committee? And Richard, oh yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think we should go ahead and get some numbers together from IKD about what this would go, how this would look and what the cost would be.
Okay, so to do that, we would need to engage IKD for additional services. That would be a fee adjustment to do their work. I did have a conversation with Yugon about that, what kind of effort that would take. And he gave me a ballpark of anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to do the kind of design work so that the committee could get some visualization of what the possibilities are.
And Yugon and I mean IKD they've worked in schools for these types of things. It's not necessarily just museum type pieces that they've worked on.
Well, honestly, most of their work has been in museum work. They have done some school work, but it's been mostly museum. But they've also done displays for children. I think you saw some examples of their work. And it's a wide range of work that they do. They don't just focus on schoolwork.
So Adam, were you gonna?
Oh, I was going to say just to so the the very rough round 10 to 20K. That's for conceptual design to get us basically to get us from ideas in a brainstorming session to a general plan. But then subsequent to that, I presume that they would need to do design development and construction level detailing and drawings on top of that. Is that right, or is that part of this rough 10 to 20K number?
Right, so the 10 to 20K number would be for them to do some conceptual design work as well as some budgeting. Let's get a range of, what will it take to execute this? And then once the committee gets that conceptual work and budget presented to them by IKD, then the next question that will come up is, do you want to engage someone who can actually finish the detailed work and then install it? One lump sum, or do you want to have IKD do the detail work and then put out an RFP for somebody else to install it? It could go either way. And they've done installation themselves, and they've had other people do fabrication and installation.
Chris, go ahead.
I really love the stuff that they showed before. Of course, they're showing their exemplary work, but very appealing. But at that kind of price, I'm inclined to hunt around and see what other people might offer, given the same template that we developed from that meeting and a little conversation. I know there's a little political pull in his direction, but at the same time, I think it might be worth talking to other consultants again for that, given that kind of price or estimate.
So if we were to do that, I guess, Adam, I'm looking to you for direction. Does that require an RFP or something? How would we go about?
Just from a sheer procurement standpoint, anything over 10K with the town would require an RFP. So we would need to generate that if that's the route the committee wants to take. Just for sheerly procuring the conceptual phase drawings and designs and things, or I'm sorry, getting a quote for the conceptual phase drawings. It's possible, I suppose, that we could, get some initial feelers around to see if that's, in the right ballpark per se. But I don't, to be perfectly honest, it's a very sort of niche set of design. It's not just standard architectural design. So I don't have a good gut shot on what that would entail.
Chris?
So since we've already got some time in with IKD, what about if we said to them, look, we'd like to get the conceptuals in at no more than $10,000. So we gave them that parameter or whatever number the rest of this committee comes up with. And then they put that amount of time into it, and we're not a museum. So we could give them some parameters of what we really want to see as outcomes. And, we don't know what it's going to cost after that. So we don't have any way to know that until we get to this next step.
Yeah. I don't know, Richard or maybe Susan even. You have input on that?
So they do great work, but if you choose to get RFPs from other people, that's fine. They may submit on that as well. And you do have your purchasing rules in town, so I respect that. But I think it may be possible also to create a contract amendment to TSKP, who would subcontract with IKD. There would be no markup. We're not interested in marking up any of their fee. It would be strictly a pass-through. They would invoice us and we would pass it directly, no markup. But that might be a more way to achieve this without violating your procurement rules. I would look to Brian and your purchasing department to confirm that, but I believe that's a route that you could take.
I think that would, in fact, from a sort of technical definition standpoint, be a route to, I guess, be happy with the purchasing policy gods, but at the same time, I guess if there's a desire or a want for members of the committee to, see what the market says and find more competitive pricing, obviously it doesn't accomplish that objective. It just helps us kind of stay in compliance with our own policy. So.
Richard, do you have a sense from UGON of what the deliverables were for his, that conceptual piece? If 20K buys us, some rudimentary floor plans with renderings and there's a fair amount of work to all that. Putting a rendering together is not just done and you get it in front of people. But is there a way to sort of, I don't want to say dip the toe, but get some concept that might align with the initial brainstorming session for a few $1,000s in the presentation, and that way we have a sense that we're at least going down the right path. And if we're not, we can take the off ramp and we've not spent $20,000. But if it's like, oh yeah, this is exciting, yeah, let's keep pursuing, then we can get into more conceptual level documentation.
Yeah, I think we could probably do it in a two-step process. One is ask UGON to describe to us what he could do for under $10,000, whether that would be one sample rendering of one wall, and then some elevations, wall elevations, to give you an example of some narrative that would be applied to the wall, or maybe some system of displaying work product by pupils, drawings, whether there's a system of display along with some sort of parameters for that display board. So that would be in the form of an elevation and maybe some sketches of some details as well as a rendering. And then if you wanted to see more walls, then it would be probably add-on to that basic fee. That's the way I would think of it structured. So sample wall, elevations, perspective, some thumbnail sketches, and a budget.
Yeah, Chris?
I don't want to cut anybody else off. It seems to me this is something we want to do. So it also, so thereby it seems like that would make sense. I mean, $2,000-3,000, what can you do? And it could go through Richard that way at this point.
Okay, I mean, that seems fine to me as well. Is there other discussion, other ideas? So then, in that case, then Richard, would you be in touch with Gong?
Yes.
And,
But did I hear a figure, a cap?
I like the $3,000 number.
Yeah. Okay. He may decline, but I can certainly ask.
But up to some level of you know, illustration of what he has in mind and what he might do.
yeah, Chris?
You know, you've already liked this presentation so far. We've got some time into it. You know, I wouldn't want to cut it off just for a few $1,000s, because
Right.
for $3,000, you might not get anything so useful. And what we need to find out is what it's going to cost for this fabulous idea. So, you know, I'd say let's keep it under 10 and really try to get some good details. A budget has got to come out of this. We got to have some sense of what it's going to cost. And I think, you know, and I don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. So I'd say let's keep it, you know, at 10 or at below, you know, 9,999, so that we can make that work.
Okay, is committee okay with that? You know, I would like to get, you know, we want to get something nice out of this, and we want to, you know, make it happen. So, okay, well then, I don't know, we need to vote on this, but is a committee consensus?
I think I get the message. So I can just act on that consensus.
Right. Thank you, Richard.
Second
Okay.
item?
FF&E?
Yeah, second item. So this evening we have Susan Pinckney here. She's next on my agenda. I want her to present the FF&E conceptual ideas as well as the budget update. I think that's a very important ingredient. I said to her, look, we need to report on the budget so the committee knows where we are before we go any further. She has been working very diligently with the educators, with Kelly, with the principal, Lauren Rodriguez. So Susan, you're on.
Okay, so are you seeing the right thing on your screens here?
Yes, we are.
Okay, just making sure. I have met it pretty extensively at this point and spoken with Kelly and Lauren and a number of members of the staff. We've had a lot of back and forth discussing the FF&E. And so I have developed what I feel is a pretty accurate budget for this particular project. And just to give you a quick overview, we're just talking about outfitting the classrooms, some of the specialty spaces, the offices, and the library, etc. And the furnishings, of course, would be coordinated with the different various, house colors as we planned with the finishes. And so that's just to kind of give you an overview of we're not looking for anything outrageous or unusual or extensive. This just gives you an idea of what a typical elementary classroom would look like. We just have mobile tables and chairs, or mobile tables and a variety of seating. This is essentially the 21st century classroom. You have a few little pieces of soft seating, some area rugs, lots of movable furniture. And so we have discussed at length the best way to go about this, what items we want, what items are going to work well. We are getting samples over next week for the people, for the staff to kind of like tush test and, kick the wheat tires, and so to speak. So anyhow, this was some of just the classroom storage that we had talked about. We gave everybody choices so that we could have, each grade would kind of have its own set of storage for the classroom, all on casters, of course. So again, very flexible, mobile in the whole 21st century teaching modality. But anyhow, so this is an approximate breakdown of the different types of categories we're looking at. I'm not going to go bore you by reading every single one of them, but this is just to give you an idea of how the money would be distributed for the various furnishings. As you can see, the biggest chunk, of course, is for the classroom furniture. Both the classroom chairs, tables, rugs, all the easels, everything else fall into this category, and then all of the wood storage, like what I just showed you, the dramatic play furniture and the wood pre-K furniture all falls into that category. So you can see the bulk of it really falls into that area, but it's also distributed throughout the building for other items. One of those things is your custodial equipment. And I got a list early on of custodial equipment that was required, and we have incorporated it into here. But just to make you aware, some of these items are not eligible for reimbursement by the state. Just to let you know, that would be like the outdoor equipment and any of the items that the state feels don't qualify, like the floor with the wet floor signs, the mop buckets, those kind of things. They tend to sort of go, no, you guys are on your own with that one. So the indoor maintenance equipment is qualified. Anything that is required to maintain the interior of the building that is a specialized piece of equipment, they will cover. So of that equipment, about 15,000 or almost 16,000 of it is covered under eligible costs. The 67, part of this is because we have like a tractor that's pretty expensive. We have a snow blower. We have some pretty expensive outdoor equipment that's needed. And it's understandable. I mean, this is not unusual. We get these types of requests from schools. So I just wanted to have that on your radar. So overall for eligible costs, what we have is a total of $1,090,760. And then of the ineligible costs with the 67 added in, that brings us to a total of $1,158,000. The allowance estimate that we've had from Colliers puts us in at 1,025. So that gives us a cost difference of 133,000. Now, I've tried to be somewhat conservative with my numbers because I know we're in a very volatile market right now. Supplies and all these things, the supply chain issues that are out there are driving costs, the lack of truck drivers, the lack of trucks, the lack of everything that I'm sure a lot of you are aware of at this point. That all of those things are kind of affecting the costs of items that are being deliverables of any type, whether you're talking about furniture or building supplies or whatever, everything's being affected right now. So I tried to be somewhat conservative. I don't want to, sit here and, gold coat it for you guys and try to make it sound like, oh, we can do this for your budget. I want you to be aware that there's a chance that when we send this out to bid, when we get the bids back, they may be higher than what is typically received because of the conditions. Now, we are definitely trying to get this out in advance. I know Colliers was very eager to make sure that we get these things out well in advance. Typically, we allow about 4 months or so from purchase order to delivery. But we are basically allowing more than 6 months in this case because we want to make sure that the vendors have plenty of time to get their orders in, that the manufacturers have plenty of time to get all of the supplies that they need and to get us into the assembly line. So that's why we are hitting it up as early as we are. So all that said, I'm here to just let you know that this is where we are. I kind of would like to at least get your approval to continue to proceed with this, if that's possible. If you want, I can we can try to go back and see if we can pare things down, but at this point, it's a moving target, and it's very difficult for me to say, if we buy this desk, it'll save us money, because we may find out this manufacturer decides to raise their prices by 10% next month, and we can't predict all of these things that are going to happen. So my personal advice would be to move forward with it, and hopefully we will come in much closer to our budget number. But I don't want to make any promises. At the same time, I want to be realistic about this whole situation. So does anyone have any thoughts about this? Any feedback, comments?
Richard?
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So our strategy, so this is what we've identified as phase 3 of the project. The previous phases were the well installation, that was phase 1. The second phase was building the building, associated site work, and the playground equipment. That's phase 2. Phase 3 is furniture and equipment and technology equipment. We want to go to the state. Colliers has told us that they want to go to the state in October to have the state review the plans and specs for both furniture as well as technology equipment. And then the plan is to release them both, go out to bid, so that bids are received. Doing this from memory, I think bids are received in early December, I believe. So in order to do that, we would need to have the full plans and specs approved, not only by the building committee, but also by the Board of Ed, I believe, on October the 14th. So our plan is to give to the building committee and the Board of Ed by October the 7th, the full set of plans. But I encourage Susan at least to give this committee some preview of what's coming. I would like to get a nod of the heads of the building committee and tell Susan that, yep, you're on the right track. We're close enough to go out to bid, is I hope what you would say. Questions?
Yeah, Rich?
I know this is probably not the time or the place for it, but Susan, I'm hearing from teachers, and teachers are concerned that the tables that have been shown in the diagrams do not have drawers, and there are teachers who are concerned about not having enough personal storage. I was wondering if, are we looking into just tables for teachers, or are there going to be desks with drawers in them?
There are quite a few opportunities for storage here. For the teacher's personal storage, they are going to have this mobile portable PED, as well as this mobile cabinet with drawers. It's a file cabinet, but can be used for storage. But there's also a lot of these other pieces, these wood pieces here that I was talking about, that are helpful with keeping things organized for the students. This type of thing, teachers love these because it helps them to organize they can put each student's name on each one of these cubbies and have a designated area for the students' homework and paperwork and things like that. And then we've also, because early on there were some concerns, we did add in some more storage up on either side of the window. We have these tall bookcases. They've got the millwork, they've got cubbies or lockers in the classrooms as well. One thing that I understand that teachers very often like to see if they can have like a book box underneath the desks and everything. One of the issues we've encountered with that is that when it comes to ADA, the ADA likes to have all students be equal. And so they want to see everybody have the exact same thing. Giving a book box to a student in a wheelchair is a challenge, because the distance, the height of that book box from the bottom of the book box to the top of the desk is so high that once you get a wheelchair under it, you've got kids sitting at their desks with their arms way up in the air. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge to get it through the state, to get them to understand, like, if we give the ADA students a book box, it's not very practical. But then they say, well, you have to because everybody else is getting one. So we found that typically teachers are usually understanding, and they are willing to work with us, and they usually will use the cubbies in the bookcases and the cubbies in the walls for a lot of the student storage, as well as all these other pieces that we are giving them.
I Susan, I'm talking more about teacher storage, like teachers' personal effects, like having a spot like in a table, you know, a desk, or where they could where teachers can put their purse, for example.
Right. That's what typically what they'll do. These are locking cabinets, so they can lock their handbag away in one of these cabinets. Also, the cabinets, the millwork will have locks as well. So if the teachers need to put stuff away they don't want the students to get to, they can lock the cabinets and they don't have to worry about that. Yes. So what's nice about having this mobile table is that it's adjustable height. It's on casters. They can push it around the classroom. It lends to the flexibility. Once you start getting into a desk that has the pedestals, the traditional type of drawers down the sides, which is what people are accustomed to, those become a bit unwieldy. And the thing is we want to move forward. We don't want to go backwards. We want to make sure that people think about ways that they can use the space that still works for them, but we got to remember too that we're in the 21st century teaching, and that we don't really want to go backwards. Like I hate to sound repetitive here, but
I get it.
Yeah.
So is there a place for also private storage, and maybe in those teachers' planning rooms, you know, those where the grade level teachers are meeting, are those also tables without storage, or are they?
Susan, on this plan that you were just showing, where you show student cubbies, there's also a wardrobe sized cabinet there.
Yep.
Can you point that out?
Yes, right here. This is a tall cabinet.
I don't see your
It
cursor.
I don't
has-
see your
Yeah, I don't
cursor.
see your cursor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so on the lower left-hand side, just north of the sink,
Oh, okay.
see that box there? That is
Yeah.
a tall wardrobe cabinet. So
Okay.
they can put their coats, their jackets, whatever inside of that cabinet and lock it up.
Okay.
So yeah, one half of the cabinet is like a tall closet and the other half has shelves.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
So-
thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if Kelly or Lauren wants to add anything based on your discussions about these.
So I'll just say there's a reason I never built a house. There are so many little decisions, and I really want to thank Susan. She really listened carefully in her visits to Mansfield, and I think has captured a lot of the desires of our teachers and how they're currently using space and the flexibilities and alternative opportunities for seating and such for students. I also want to mention that this went out to teachers in June, a very detailed, I don't remember, Susan, it was like 70 slides, I think. So that the teachers could provide us with feedback. And we did hear back from several teachers. And all of that information was then reviewed with Susan, and every teacher got a personal reply back from us. But one of the things that I've come to appreciate is this ADA requirement. And certainly it's not something that we've had to adhere to in our current classrooms, which are kind of a makeshift of leftover furniture from home and furniture that's been in the schools for 30 years. So, that's one of the things that we have to help teachers understand, that we are creating an environment that really is equitable for everyone. So I feel pretty good about where we are. I think there'll be lots of opportunities for teachers to do different things with the furnishings. I mean, just look at what's here, these little ottomans and the sit-upons and, the wobble seats, and the fact that so much of the storage units are mobile gives teachers the opportunity to split their physical space up. Susan, I did have one question though, with regards to procurement. So
Yes.
the wood, most of the wood cabinetry, is that all from Creative? Is it Creative Playthings?
Jaunty Craft or Community Playthings. We've
Community,
got kind of a mix of things. So
And
yeah,
Community Playthings, they're fairly local, aren't they? Are they
they're
like,
in New York. They're in New
Right.
York. Yeah.
I'm hoping that might help.
Yeah. They're a wonderful company to work with as well. It's a very interesting company. I could really delve into their history because they have a very fascinating, it's kind of a commune type of a situation. It's a religious type commune for the Bruderhof. which is sort of an offshoot of the Mennonites. So it's all communal living, and everybody works in the factory and everybody contributes in some way. It's very interesting, very interesting. We did go up there for a tour at one point just to check it out, and it's a fascinating thing. And they produce a wonderful product. We very often have teachers specifically request their products.
I know their products too. They're all obviously American made, and they used to have a community in Norfolk, Connecticut, and I had a chance to visit that community once. So it's very high quality.
Yeah, we
Mhm.
saw some of that furniture in, I think, at least one of the schools that we visited.
Mhm.
In Bloomfield. Mhm.
Yeah, yes.
Right. Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, Susan, can you just, the sort of reading chair, there we go. Is that the model that you had in mind?
Which one are we talking about?
The sort of teacher's reading chair.
The
to read to the
rocking,
kids' chair.
this like rocking
Yeah, the little
chair.
rocking chair.
Well, actually, we have that up as a point of discussion. We haven't figured out which version we're going to go with. There's actually a few different models that I have sent over that, and we're having a sample, a few samples actually sent out next week so that they can test them and sit in them
To
and be
Lauren,
comfortable with them.
you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, to Lauren. They'll be going to Southeast School. So
Yeah.
they're going out either the end of next week or the beginning of the following week. It's the soonest we could get them because, of course, you
That's
know,
fine.
ordering
I
samples
just-
is a little challenging, but
I have had a little experience with rocking chairs, and that looks like,
Yeah.
that particular one does not look like it would rock comfortably, believe it or not. So. I
yeah,
would
we've used this in
encourage
other schools. We
people
have
to
used it in
actually
other
use it.
schools,
Yeah,
but
when they test it,
true,
they have to use it.
yes. Yeah. So the one that we did have, one of the comments that we got back from the teachers was he was concerned about the possibility of squished fingers,
Squishing
which
fingers,
is
yeah.
perfectly understandable. And there are other models out there that are probably a little bit more friendly to younger children. And so that's one of the models that will be getting delivered, which I think that the teachers may find is perfectly acceptable for them. And I think it's also kind of got a little bit more of a fun profile, which makes it little bit more, interesting for the classroom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess you don't need an official decision from the committee today, other than, are we okay with what's being proposed in
Yep,
general
just-
so far?
Yeah, just want to make sure that, if somebody suddenly says, whoa, slam on the brakes, I wanted to get this out there now rather than later. So
I did have one other budget question, Randy. I don't know if this is who gets Adam, maybe, or whoever. When the, there we go. When OSCNR, or however the letters go, when they see this budget, forgetting the custodial equipment that goes over, do they say, oh, this looks fine, we'll give you the 60-odd%? Or do they say, nope, sorry, you already budgeted whatever you budgeted? Like on the telecommunications stuff where,
Yep.
200 and some odd thousand over. How does this work?
they will go by the number that was originally submitted in the documents to the state. They do not like to shuffle money between kitties. They don't like to say if we have to add to it, they need to have some very compelling reasons for that. We go in, we sit down, typically we have a meeting, and there's a particular reviewer that we meet with, this woman, Barbara, who has been with the state for a few years now. And we sit down and literally go through like every single piece of furniture in the documents. She's very meticulous. She is a self-professed OCD. And she pulls out her scale to make sure she's got the 3-foot clearances in classrooms. She looks at every single piece of furniture. She'll challenge it. She'll say, hey, why do you need 2 rugs in the classroom? And then I have to argue and say, we need this for the whole 21st century teaching. And this is the philosophy that goes behind it. And then she'll say yay or nay. And so far, knock on wood, I've been able to convince her to go through with items that she questioned. So,
And if she goes through with all these items, does she then say, okay, then the higher price is reasonable?
Yeah, she doesn't look at the individual prices of items so much as their functionality and whether it's worth them putting a 20-year bond on it. You know, she's not going to approve something that only has like a 1-year warranty because she doesn't want something that's they're still going to be paying for 19 years
Right,
after
but
it's dead,
again,
you know?
if she goes through the whole thing, you've convinced her of every single piece,
Mhm.
and our, cost is 1,090,000.
Yeah.
Then does she say, okay, I agreed with everything, so here's your 1,090,000?
She will say, I don't know what the number is. Are we carrying the 1,025,000, I believe is the number that we submitted to the state. And that's the number that she will cap out at unless there was some kind of major change in the program.
Okay, thank you.
One thought, this is being designed as going out to bid.
Mhm.
No matter if you go out to bid or you purchase off what they call the state list, I believe Barbara Fabiani has indicated you need to submit plans and specs with the anticipation of going out to bid.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes.
So the committee will see a full set of plans and specs, an invitation to bid, sample contract, a bid form, and a description of each and every piece, as well as a by room breakdown of where all the pieces go. It's really quite an extensive document. This is just a highlight that you're seeing this evening. But when you see the full document, that's the document that we'll need this committee and the Board of Ed to approve before we go back to the state for their review.
Correct.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay.
I just had one,
Go ahead,
Randy, if I
Adam.
could, just about logistics. So obviously this is being put forth to this committee for initial sort of perusing and consideration before the final vote. The plan was to have this approved by this committee and the Board of Education on October 14th. There are meetings, regularly scheduled meetings for both committees that night. So the two talking points that we wanted to bring up were, do we want to have a joint session or do them in sequence? It's approved at this committee and then approved by the BOE later that night. And then the second element is, do we think that the Board of Education needs a similar intro presentation prior to October 14th? And if so, should we pull a special meeting for that?
Kathy or Kelly, you have thoughts on that?
I'm thinking, Randy, that before you can ask the board to vote on something and give its approval, they're going to have some understanding of what it is that they're voting on. So I do feel that we need some kind of special meeting.
So
And
something,
the other consideration is that our board is currently meeting in person. So I'm not sure how a joint meeting would work.
yeah, I mean, I'm fine doing this sequentially, but we could do it because we have our own regular meeting that evening. Tony?
I would want to have the board's approval before this committee approves it. I mean, we can approve it, and if the board disapproves it, then where do we go? I mean, it seems to me the board is more important than we are on this.
So we would have to set up a special meeting prior to that date.
I feel like we're the subcommittee reporting to the Board of Ed, and so we think this is perfectly good. We suggest doing it, and then it goes to the board. Tony, I'm in response to what you said.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of inclined to agree with that, but you don't have a regular scheduled board meeting before the 14th?
Yeah, yes. We do have one on the 6th, Kelly? Is that what you?
I'm sorry, you just shorted out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
You're asking if we could do a special meeting on October 6th?
yes.
I think we need to do that, yes.
And that would be as a preview before the final vote on the 14th.
Correct.
Am I understanding you? Okay.
I will say, Randy, Kathy and I were talking about needing a special meeting for another purpose on that evening, and we don't have confirmation from board members yet that they're available, but if we can make that work, Kathy, we can combine the two agenda items.
Okay. And to follow up what Randy just suggested is that we have the information session on October 6th, but then we would take the vote by the board on October 14th.
Correct.
But once again, that goes back to Tony's question about, we would be doing that after the school building committee meets to vote.
To me, I think that it's fine to do it building committee first and then board for the final vote. But
If I can say something here, I've been doing this for quite a few years now, and typically the building committee is the one who's kind of down in the trenches, and they have a better feel for what's going on. And they are, as you said, the subcommittee to the board. So typically we find that the building committee wants to be able to sign off on it first, and then it would go to the board, and then the board signs off on the paperwork once they've approved it. I have yet to have a board say, oh, no, go back to work, sharpen your pencil. Usually they're like, building committee, do you feel that this is exactly what you need for this building? And if the building committee is in approval and the board is usually on board, they might have a few questions, but I don't typically have any issues.
okay, so that in that case, also on October 6th, if there was a special meeting, you would probably want a presentation from Susan.
Correct.
Okay, and
It doesn't have to be extensive, just to give the members some idea of what it is that they're voting on. Keep them up to date.
process.
No problem.
All right, I guess then from our perspective, the sense of the committee is that we're on the right track with this, and the furniture looks fine. I'm looking at everybody off to the side here, but okay. It seems like that's kind of the sense of the committee.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Susan? Okay, we will then, I guess we'll get a final report on this for the October 14 meeting. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. With
Thank you
that,
very
I
much,
will,
Susan, for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
And Susan, we'll be in touch on an actual date and time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kelly.
All right, and then a similar update on the technology, and we've got Jamie, who's been sitting here patiently. And this is the same sort of idea, right, Richard, that we, as a preview now, we would approve it finally October 14.
That's correct. It's the same.
And the board also needs to approve that.
That's correct.
Right.
So we can get into it now. I can share my screen. Let's see. So I sent through Collier's 3 sets of documents. One is a layout of technology equipment, which I'll just briefly touch upon. And this is still being revised as we finalize things, but we have what are called WAPs, wireless access points for internet. There are 3 on the site. Those same boxes you'll find on the lower floor. So there's a WAP on the ceiling here, another one over here. And then other things such as smart boards. There are 75-inch and 65-inch smart boards. That's That's what this symbol represents. There's telephone locations. There are either wall phones or desk phones that are designated by these blue indications. And also on the sheets, there's a list of what these devices are. And that's the purpose of this, to show where these devices are located. This is equipment that is purchased by the owner, in most cases installed by the owner, in a few cases installed by the contractor's electrician. The WAPs, the wireless access points, are being installed by the electrician, but they need to be purchased and supplied by the owner. Other kinds of equipment, like the smart boards, are actually going to be purchased from a vendor who will then install those devices. And then telephones would be purchased by the owner and also installed by the telephone vendor. So this is not the final plan, but I did want to give you a preview of that. This is the plan of the garage. So we also have wireless access points in the garage area as well. We have a list of technology equipment. That's another document that I submitted for the committee's review. And that is divided into 5 categories of equipment. And we typically like to do categories just like we do furniture and equipment, because vendors typically will bid on a category. So for example, category number 1, which is called telecom and MDF equipment, is a telephone, tele-O2, and that's specified here. We show that there are 79 devices here. And then the second category is data network equipment. These are switches, network switches. And in this particular case, the switches are purchased by the owner through a vendor, but then they are installed by the owner. I guess that means Jamie, that means you would be installing them along with your folks. And so,
That's correct.
So that's the second category. The third category is the wireless access points. They're either mounted outdoors on a pole for outdoor connections, or they're mounted within the building. And there's quite a number of those devices in the project. And then we have printers. There are 5 printers in this list of equipment. That's category 4. Category 5 is audiovisual information technology. So that's where we see the smart boards. We see wall mounting hardware to mount those smart boards on the wall. And we have also LCD monitors or TV monitors. This is, for example, where we would have the smart board, or not the smart board, sorry, the
Dashboard.
the dashboard, the digital dashboard. Now, you had a digital dashboard discussion, energy dashboard discussion today. I don't know if that vendor is actually supplying the monitor. We have listed it here in this list of equipment, but that may not be necessary if Allerton is providing the actual monitor itself. So we need to clarify that with Jamie. But as you can see, the total at the moment is $895,000 plus a soft cost. Now, you're not paying any extra for the soft cost. Soft cost is already buried into our services. And our services are really to compile the lists that your technology folks need, but we are doing that in a format that the state accepts and they review, and it's done in a format for bidding purposes. This will go through a bid process, just like furniture and equipment. And unless we do that, it's not eligible for reimbursement. So we have to comply with the state's system. But if you combine that budget, we have a total of $915,000. And the reason we put soft costs in there is because, again, the reviewers very often look for that line item. And so it's indicated here. Now, the other document I submitted to the committee is a list of cut sheets that we have to give you a better sense of what these devices are. We show you a picture of that particular telephone. And we show the estimate, including installation. This is network equipment. Again, there's a price for that here, estimate here. And so you can go through this whole list of cut sheets and try to make some sense of what these devices are. As you can see, look at this, just connecting cables, but there's lots of them. Another switch, network switch, and so on. And so we've gone through this carefully with Jamie and his folks. So this gives you some sense of what's involved. This is a wireless access point made by Aruba or HP. And this is the device. This is a protective box for the wireless access points in the gymnasium, so if someone throws a ball in the gym and it hits this, it protects the wireless access point. And we have mounting brackets for the WAPs that are mounted outdoors. And then we have printers, plus letter trays, plus smart boards. This is what they look like. This is a Belkin charging station for your Chromebooks. These would be placed on countertops that are already in the project. Wireless keyboards and mouse or mice for teachers, wall-mounted brackets for wall-mounted monitors, other kinds of brackets for wall-mounted smart boards. This is a bracket that has an articulating and tilt arm. This is for the smart board that we would be placing on the stage, on the back wall of the stage as an instructional wall. So that gives you some sense of the kinds of equipment we're talking about. Let's go back to the budget here. So I know that there's a budget that's in the project. That budget was developed at a much earlier stage. I don't have that figure in front of me, but I believe it's 695,000 in the budget. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. But we're over that budget. All of this is justifiable equipment. Jamie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's a great summary. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that a lot. Just a couple of things that I'll note for the committee, anticipating some questions. This represents items we would need to purchase. So, for example, you might look at the list of printers and copiers and say, does that mean the school's only going to have 5 printers and copiers? The school will have more. In many cases, and that's a good example, we're able to move equipment in the existing schools into the new school. If we have equipment or items that would be good to continue to use, we do that. We don't repurchase just for the sake of purchasing them. So know that when you see those numbers, the school may actually have more. For example, it's going to have more printers and copiers than that. We're just trying to reuse and repurpose things that we already own rather than just buy them for the sake of it. Another note would be, know that the models that we put in, that comes through discussions with vendors and research. We've had a lot of informal discussions. Ultimately, this would be a bidding process, either using state bids and or RFQs. So the exact models that come in may vary slightly based on what's currently available and what's the best price. In some cases, we're providing guidance to the vendors to say, this is specifications we're interested in, this is an example model, but that isn't to say a vendor might not suggest something else that still meets those requirements. One of the key things that, similar to what was mentioned with Susan, I would echo, while we're trying to move in an expedited manner, we are finding, similar to how Susan has found, due to COVID issues and delivery chain issues, that we really do want to get these orders in early. We are finding a lot of the stuff we order, there is much longer lead time to receive it. And so we want to make sure we have plenty of time to address any of that. And that's why we're looking to move forward and get these in place. You'll also notice in terms of some of the costs, we've tried to accurately reflect some of the supply chain and COVID issues have created increased costs and equipment. And so we've tried to be accurate in reflecting those, working with vendors to make sure that we're trying to give you our best estimates of what these things will actually cost. Obviously, when the bids come in, some items may be a little cheaper, some items may be a little more expensive. But as we get better information, we're updating that. An example would be, if you wouldn't mind, Richard, going up one page in the nets category. We did meetings this week related to if you need to bring fiber in from the street, which is not something we've done before, but for a variety of reasons, those costs are now higher than they once were. So for example, that number that says 12,000 there, we're actually estimating 40,000 now. You won't generally see a change like that. We feel like, generally speaking, our numbers are pretty solid. That was the last one we were kind of waiting on to work with utility vendors. But just know that when the actual bids come in, things may be a little higher, a little lower, but other than that one I just mentioned that's changing from 12 to 40, we think we're pretty accurate in terms of those numbers. I would say those are the pieces I wanted to make sure I mentioned before we went to questions.
Thank you, Jamie.
Any questions for Richard or maybe Chris?
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if I noticed Al's eyes open on that one. Have we got a conduit under the street for this or not?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the way it works is we've been working with both the general contractor and vendors. It comes in via telephone pole, but then it does come into the building via conduit that we're providing that already is accounted for in the general contractor. They have already planned for that and are putting in that conduit, and the fiber that's coming in will make use of that.
Okay, so but I'm concerned about getting it across the road. Has that already been done or accommodated?
It's coming overhead.
It's
right?
coming overhead on the roadside. The telephone poles come onto the property itself. The conduit portion is on the property
that's
itself.
fine.
And that
I
has
just
been
didn't want to
accounted for.
be expected to have it underground, because even the town zoning people don't like you running stuff over the roads. Jamie, I'm curious, is it all new? You mentioned about reusing equipment. Are the smart boards all new? Are we reusing any smart boards?
So in the case of the smart boards at the elementary level, because we knew this project was coming, we have been thoughtful about about essentially repairing and keeping old smart boards in place. So at the elementary level now, generally we have smart boards that are quite old, and so they would not.
Right. Okay. Good planning. The last question related to all this is all of these WACs that are around. Are there so many in what seems like a small area because of the capacity of each one for connections or range, or what's the, it looks like there were 6 in the gym. There are those 3 outside. I would think one central one would do the outside job. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that. In the case of the outside ones, WAPs can be one of 2 things, either what's called omnidirectional, where they just have a circular circumference, or they can be pointed in a direction. In the case of the outdoor ones, we're targeting them in a certain direction. So each of those 3 point in a different direction. 2 of them are primarily pointing, the one on the far left kind of points down and to the left. The one in the lower right points down. The one up at the top would be more pointing out into the parking lot. So they're handling primarily different directions. Inside the building, sometimes that's the case, or sometimes it's the amount of capacity. So,
Jamie, on those again, is it possible to get one that does a larger range that's less expensive, or is that not? I mean, all the wiring we've got to do, all of the maintenance, then those are 3 things out there. Maybe it's redundancy you're after. I don't know. I mean, I can make explanations or excuses, but it just seems like, wow, they're so close together. Why not one more effective one?
In that case, honestly, 3 is more cost effective, because then we can use models that point in a direction. If we needed one that could cover that large an area, we would need to find a way to push more power to it. partly where the cabling is not too bad is there's already conduit and cabling having to go to those locations because of the security cameras.
Great, thank you.
So, and last part, in terms of the inside of your building, what we looked at was we looked at where would be the load. They're one-to-one devices. And so we did counts based on estimated number of students in classrooms and so forth in the breakout areas. In the gymnasium, we were accounting for if there were events. And that's sort of where we came up with our counts, because we didn't want to, with WAPs, you don't want to overdo it, actually, not only because of cost, but sometimes if you overdo it, the air, the spectrum gets too crowded. So it's, you know, based on anticipated usage at peaks.
And is there a benefit in the gymnasium to putting them in the center of the ceiling and again, reducing the number of units?
There is not. In the case of the gymnasium, having on the perimeters gives us a little more control. And also from an install perspective, actually is a little cheaper because then we can generally wall mount them.
Okay, other questions? Chris McAvoy?
Jamie, has the school always purchased copiers or have you ever leased them? There's so many changes that come out with copiers and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes we find leasing is more cost effective, or would that not work?
Yeah, sure. No, I can speak to that. We've done both, depending on what's made the most sense cost-wise. The majority of the copiers and printers that are going to be in this new school are coming from the existing schools. So whether they're already owned or leased, that will just be continued. These 5 that we're purchasing are ones where it'll be more cost-effective just to purchase them. Over the lifespan, the lease would end up being 2 to 3 times the cost. So.
Any other questions? Okay. So again, this is a preview.
Right.
You can review these plans. And if you have other questions later, we will be ultimately approving them on the 14th of October.
That's
I
correct.
actually, Randy, I don't know if, or Richard, tell me if now is not the time to ask you, but I was just looking at like these outdoor speakers, and it seems like they're redundant on the east end of the building, or could be placed more sensibly. And is this the time to ask about this or not?
Sure, why not?
Okay. And there are none on the west end that I could see, but the thing is so small, I really had a hard time seeing it. But you've got 2 on the gymnasium and 1 on the north wing of section B. And you can't see them together. You have to put the things, you can't see them together on the plans that the way they're presented here. But in any case, there's nothing on the west end, which is where you've got, or from what I could tell, again, I could easily be wrong, on the south side where I would expect kids to congregate and where you might want announcements to be heard. I assume these are for announcements.
That's correct.
Okay.
But also the speakers are not in this technology package. They are already in the general contractors package. So you can see they're not highlighted in color. We highlighted the ones that are in color for the vendors of this technology equipment.
Okay.
But in terms of the coverage of speakers, I think we show what's required. I think they're
Well,
correct.
is it what's wanted? I looked, there are a couple of, you've got basically 3 speakers over in the loading dock and parking arrival area. And again, there's one that aims toward the garden area, and that's the only other one I could find. So again, it seems to me you would want to have the speakers going to where you expect kids to be more than anything else. And again, and as I mentioned, the ones that you do have feel like they're redundant. I think they could be placed more sensibly. I also felt, this would be a question for Lauren in the 21st century model, and Rich too. Is it preferable to be interrupted by the office with a over the intercom blast that distracts every student, or to have the phone ring? I asked that because you've got the two-way speakers in the classroom much of the time. I didn't look, again, it's so tiny I couldn't get to it. But I just thought, I bet they're more expensive, and are they necessary? I also felt like if you take a look at the locations of the speakers, as they're just plunked down here and there, that whoever put them in must have somebody in the wiring business they're trying to support, because they're really in surprisingly distant places when they could be on opposite walls. So that may not be to be answered right now, but it's something I think it deserves another look and thought.
Okay.
Chris,
Okay.
I feel like, Chris, I just want to check in. It sounded like you were asking a question, but I just want to make sure I had the right question to answer. It was
really about how do teachers like or prefer to be interrupted with a, Miss Smith, send Susie down, her mother's here, or with a phone call. And then Miss Smith needs to answer, got it, on the intercom, again, interrupting everybody in the middle of reading a story or something, versus having a student person who's in charge, whose job it is to answer the phone and relay a message. So
to be honest, we have both right now. Teachers can self-select, and they do. Some have it on auto ring, and some do like the brief interruption to address the child right there.
Great.
Okay, any other questions for Jamie or Richard that pertain to the technology package? Okay, all right, then we will move on. Thanks, Jamie, for joining us today.
Thanks.
Okay, so I have one more item on my agenda. Sorry, Al, I'm taking all this time.
I actually have another Zoom meeting I have to attend.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to give us a brief construction update? Do you have time?
Sure, I could do a brief.
All right, let's flip flop. Go ahead.
I'll share the screen.
Okay.
Can everyone see the aerial view?
Yes.
Okay, so we've made some good progress on the foundations. We've got the foundations done over to this point. We ran into some unsuitable material over here, so we had to stop. From last meeting, we've stripped this wall. This was poured previously. We've formed and poured this section of wall, the retaining walls, and then we've started forming the balance of the retaining wall in C. We've got a lot of the interior piers in. We started backfilling the foundations and getting the slab up to grade. The stairwell in lower B area has been formed and is complete. Go to the next slide. These are walls that get insulated and backfilled. This is a view of them at ground level in lower B, getting the slab up to grade. This is them compacting the area in B, getting ready for steel. Drilling rigs are working well. No issues to date. They're supposed to be done October 15th.
Are they halfway done approximately, or not yet?
They're about halfway done with the walls, but they still have the distribution piping to do. This is a footing that we were digging in the gym area, and we came across, if you can see here, these roots sticking out of the soil. There's a layer of organic material that is below. It's about 8 foot below the existing grade that was there. So we've had Clarence Welty come out today to look at this, see if it's an issue, and he'll get back to us with a plan if it needs to be addressed. This is that root layer right here. It was almost like this was the forest bed originally, and then someone dumped a lot of fill on top of this, and then topsoil above that. So there's a section of organic material that runs through this area. That's it for the photos. But everything is going well. We got steel starting on the 4th. We've had 2 loads of steel arrive already and being stored on site. So everything is moving along per schedule. No problems to other than this organic material to talk about.
Any quick questions for Al? Okay, well then in that case, I will let you go, and thanks for your patience.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Okay, then we will go back to the final item from Richard.
Yes, thank you. So school entrance sign. During some job meetings, we've had some conversations about that. We know that we have in the contract with Newfield, we have conduit that goes all the way out to the site entrance of the new school. This is where visitors would be coming in. That's all we have is conduit. At the time that we made the submission to planning and zoning, we wanted to at least include that conduit there, but we did not have a plan for actual signs. At that time, we didn't know what the school name would be, if the school even wanted signs out at the street. So it's time to start thinking about that, and maybe even getting a signage company to submit some proposals for what the school sign could be. There are companies that do monumental signs for properties at entrances to their properties. They come in a variety of ways of doing it. They could be metal signs, they could be masonry with metal on them, they could be even stone walls with some sort of signage on them. It could be wood, carved wood, you name it. I mean, there's a whole world of signage out there. But you may want signage that's illuminated. That's why we put the conduit out there. And getting approval from planning and zoning takes some time. Their jurisdiction includes signage at the street, identifying properties. So I would encourage the building committee, if they're interested, to engage someone to design and then fabricate and install signage at the entrance to the site. This is for the committee to discuss.
Okay. Adam, is there, in terms of paying for a sign, is this something that Colliers will need to review to see what kind of budget we might have?
Yeah, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's something that we can distribute. One of the things that might be good is to get a sense, to Richard's point, of what type of sign might the committee be thinking in terms of overall design. You know, as Richard said, there's a million different things that we can go about. You can get a teeny tiny thing for not much money, or this grandiose Las Vegas affair that would that'd break the budget. So yeah, in terms of raw numbers, that's something we can disseminate, but it might not mean much just as a raw figure outside of the general concept of, you know, is this a wood sign? Is this a stone sign with pin lettering? Is there an aesthetic that seems to make sense to the committee?
Okay. Rich?
I was kind of hoping that we were not going to stick with the Mansfield Elementary School name. I feel like, I don't know if I want to spend money on a sign if we think that we might be looking for a better name. I mean, quite honestly, I was disappointed by the fact that we came up with the name that we have, and that it was so rushed at the end. I feel like it was a missed opportunity to engage the community. I just don't think it's the name for the building. And so I want, before we spend money on the sign, I want to know, are we really going to call it Mansfield Elementary School? Is that the name we're sticking with?
In terms of naming this school, that is actually up to the town council. It is not really our purview. Board of Ed made a recommendation and the town council will be taking it up sometime soon, I believe. So the question of the name, whether we put it on the sign, and if we, the alternative would be we don't put up a sign at all, I guess. But yeah, Tony?
I support Mansfield Elementary School simply because they're in our naming efforts in the past, it's been really fairly controversial. Old person, new person, somebody who's died, somebody who's alive. It can get really difficult, and I don't think that at the moment there's anybody who automatically rises to the level of naming. Besides which, we have two very famous educators whose the schools are named for, and we're going to lose those. And I think the somewhere inside the building there has to be an acknowledgement of at least those two people, and the legacy of that school. I would like a sign that is as natural as possible. It needs to be lighted since we're going to have evening events. And the third thing is the town has a logo, and so does the school system, and we should think about how and whether the town's logos should be incorporated.
Tony, I would just add to that briefly, without being too specific. Folks may be aware that there's a gateway signage project that's underway. The town's going to be getting some pretty impressive gateway signage as you come into town, and so it would probably be worthwhile for the committee to take note of those renderings and see if there's a way to potentially tie in with that sort of motif for a sort of consistent appearance.
Yep.
Do you have a person or a firm that you've engaged already to create these signs?
We do. Those details I don't have at my fingertips, unfortunately, but the signs, after some delay, they're going to be going in soon. And so I'll get with Linda Painter and Derek Delay, who've been kind of the points in our, and Cynthia Van Zelm for that matter too. I can get all the relevant information. And like I said, these will be going in soon, so you'll actually see what the signs look like. They took some time to be designed and developed, but they're finally going to be constructed. And I'm happy to share that information with the committee. I just need some help from staff to pull it together.
And these aren't signs that are just on a pole, are they? They're a bigger, more substantial.
Correct. It's like there's stonework involved, and yeah, very, very prominent quote unquote gateway signage. So as you come into the community from all the major transportation arteries, you've arrived in Mansfield.
Chris, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I would suggest that we find out that number from Adam, what we had held into the project. And then after we get the information from Ryan about these gateway type signs, that we figure out what we can do that might be, I don't want to say temporary, but maybe not the last thing we ever think about in terms of a sign, deferring to Rich's thing about the name of the school, but we have to have something on the school when it opens. So we have to go to PZC so we can get that permission for the size and the lighting and all that stuff. And we should just back into it a little bit with knowing what we got in the budget.
Okay, Adam?
So 2 points on that. If yeah, if there's a concern about final naming and all that, there are opportunities to have the sign be designed in such a way where, if 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, it wants to change, you swap out the lettering as opposed to, a wood sign that's carved with everything in there and you have to replace the whole sign. And then the other thing I was going to suggest, in addition to budget numbers and the information from Ryan on the gateway signage and the firms retained and the potential cost for those, if Richard or Jeff could put together just the quick site plan of where potential locations might be out front, so we know if we're not in the state right of way, or what where that might look and sit and that kind of thing. And then maybe the next meeting we can just kind of put it all together and get a more substantive look.
Okay. All right. Well, we start the process rolling anyway. Okay, so we'll be revisiting the signage question. Okay, then Richard, is that all from you?
That's all for me this evening. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us then to our review of the invoices. Those were included in your packet. I don't know, Adam, if you have anything to say regarding the invoice package, or if there's questions.
Nothing particularly of interest necessarily. It's a standard monthly packet. Any questions, more than happy to answer. Any questions? If not, then is there a motion to approve the August invoice package? Chris, will make that motion.
Yep, I move that we approve the invoice package presented on September 28th. That includes the invoice summary that is labeled August.
Okay, so the August 2021 invoice summary with invoices from CES and Colliers, IMTL, Langen, PSKP, Weston Sampson, and Newfield Construction. Thank you, Chris. Is there a second? James? Madison?
Randy, just for when I'm looking at it, it does say August. It's the date on it is 9/23.
9/23, yes. It's the August 2021 invoice package. Okay, Madison seconded. Any questions? If not, then all in favor of approving these invoices, give me a sign. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Builder's risk insurance. This is something that's new, that's before us. Adam, you can tell us about it.
Yes, so typically with large construction projects, you'll have some of those builder's risk insurance to help protect the project should something arise. Natural disasters, terrorism is even a consideration, that sort of thing. And you typically get them installed at the beginning of the project to cover the term of the project while it's under construction. So that's what this policy is. It was obtained through CIRMA, the town's current liability provider of insurance. And they provided us with a couple quotes. We then coordinated that with the town manager and director of finance about deductible values and that sort of thing. So this is the quote that's put before the committee for approval. It's under budget from what we had for this type of insurance policy. We had 70 grand allocated, and this is coming in at 40, just over 40.
Okay. Questions? Okay, in that case, is there a motion to approve the insurance policy certificate quote from Star Insurance Companies? Thank you, Chris. Second, Steve.
Just one other point, just for the record, the certificate of insurance does have one, actually that terrorism rider that's already covered under the town. So the draft motion that was made subtracts that out, so we're not paying twice.
Okay, so this would be approve the insurance policy certificate from Star Insurance Companies minus the terrorism coverage that's already provided the town's LAP insurance policy. Okay, Then with-
Just a question, I'm intrigued that it's going backwards from 610. How'd you make them do that?
There's going to be a subsequent letter that is going to be drafted confirming that nothing has happened between, no claims have arisen since the start of construction. So normally you would have it at start. We needed to get it lined up, and so it's retroactive in a sense, but only for the purposes of covering the entire length of the project. But there's been no claims thus far. That's why
Well, it's useless. I mean, it's brings no value, and there was no incentive to move it forward.
That's the
Oh, my.
builder's risk policies are for the term of the project regardless. So that way they can document that there has not yet been a claim.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second on the floor. Is all in favor? Please give me a sign. Any opposed or any abstentions? Okay, thank you. And then finally, the tree removal RFP.
Yes. So this was presented, I believe, at the last committee meeting or the meeting before as a draft, just for committee members' review. The final version is substantively the same, just some tweaks based on conversations with town arborist and the, I'm sorry, town tree warden and the arborist. But including the consideration the committee members had from last go around, where they wanted to, several of you voiced a desire to see if there was some cost savings by not saving the understory trees, such that if it made more sense to have them take it out and plant additional trees back, we might be able to make that decision on a budgetary basis. So the RFP is set up such that we'll have a mandatory site walkthrough. Bidders will be shown the trees with the markings to be taken down, and then they'll submit pricing to see whether or not there can be some savings by saving the trees, or if it makes more sense to let the understory trees be cut down and replant something.
Okay.
Adam, could you just clarify this? I've forgotten what we were trying to do here, where it says the removal of 5 mature trees that were previously cut. Was that just shortening the stumps?
Those were, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, there were 5 trees that were adjacent to one of the residences that the town had cut down on a more expedited basis because of the upcoming storms, and there was a concern that they might fall on the property. So the trees were cut down, but they weren't hauled away. So there are stumps there. It's just to get those fairly sizable logs out of
The
it.
trunks are still there.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
It's just removing the trees that were felled.
One
Okay.
point of conversation that did come up was with regard to if there was a desire to either bake into the RFP or what have you, to save, a sizable tree trunk or whatnot for some sort of activity later, whether it be having a local woodworker turn it into a sculpture or a bench or a bunch of coasters to hand out at a grand opening or something of that ilk. I think this request came a number of months back, but I didn't know if the committee had any thoughts or desires or to entertain saving, a log or two.
Tony?
This has been my idea all along, so I think I have to speak to it. If we could set aside a trunk or two to see if we could do something with it, that would be a good idea.
Okay. So,
You can vote me down if you want, but
we have an area we can store that, right, at the transfer station, and so
yes.
I mean, it really shouldn't materially cost us anything.
Yeah, I would put it into the RFP as just a line item to make sure they don't, haul it away and use it for something else. But functionally, I don't see an issue with finding some place to put it for a while until we do something with it.
Yeah, we do have space just down the road, so that would probably be fine. If we end up not using it, nothing's really lost. Okay, so is there a motion then to approve and publish the invitation to bid and the RFP for tree removal services.
I move.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second? Addison, okay. Any final comments, questions? In that case, all in favor of approving the motion, give me a sign. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, well, finally, we are at the end of our agenda. So it's been a long meeting. Thank you all for sticking through all this with us. I will just mention that I am going to have a table at the Celebrate Mansfield Festival, and I would appreciate some help from the building committee. It's from 2 to 6 that day. It's Saturday, October 2. And I will send out a reminder email about it and look for some additional help. Just to provide information for our residents in Mansfield. Then, is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Chris McNabo, second, Chris Kiefner. Then if you're in favor, you can sign off and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much, Randy.